The thing that struck me about the films, actually all of the films in the competition, but also, of course, the ones that we gave various prizes to, was the subtlety of them, whether they were advancing causes of social justice, such as a portrait like 48 of political prisoners of the dictatorship in Portugal, or portraits of a playwright in The Arbor, or of a poet in Alan Berliner's short, or the portrait of an urban ecosystem, the junkyards and auto shops that lie in the shadow of a baseball stadium in New York City that are imperiled by gentrification and government neglect. In all of these cases, they tell subtle and complex stories in inventive ways, and that they try to experiment with documentary techniques and also storytelling techniques in ways that aren't heavy-handed or overtly propagandistic or politicized. It's very simple. We just look for good films, and you have to be attuned to what a filmmaker is trying to do in each case, and that can be very different depending on the film. So I think it's important to have a set of criteria in your head, but also to not have that criteria be the thing that dictates what you decide to give a prize to, because you might be surprised. And I think that any good juror, of course, keeps an open mind and tries to see as much as they can, and then process what they've seen and have some time to think about what really stays with you. I think that the thing that's important when you give a prize is not only that it has enduring importance, but that it has some sort of, there's some sort of attempt to create something new in the documentary form. And so I think that that's the one thing that all of us were actually quite unified in agreeing upon when we gave these various prizes. Obviously, when you have a Jean Vigo prize, you're looking for someone who is, let's say, pushing the boundaries of the genre or experimenting with different kinds of techniques, as Vigo did, but also creating something that's truly personal, as Vigo was. So in a way, that prize in particular dictated itself based on the person it honors. Foreign parts, I think, as I said, I speak for the entire jury. We felt that it was a very sensitive and humane portrait of a very difficult and complex issue, which is how urban ecosystems develop. Do they develop organically over a long period of time, as this series of junkyards and auto shops have in Queens, New York, that really serve the entire community of New York City, but that really developed over a long period and in a very kind of both efficient and, as I said, kind of organic way. And I think that that's the success of any city, is to develop organically, versus a kind of ecosystem that develops through gentrification and the impositions of certain urban planning projects that are insensitive to the needs of the community. I think that's really at the heart of what this film is about, and it's really about people who somehow find a way of organizing themselves to create something that is both efficient and nurturing. I mean, it's a really nurturing community that's really in danger of being destroyed by government indifference and greed. And I think that the way that the filmmakers have told the story, Verena Paravel and J.P. Sniadecki, is to do it in a way that's what they call sensory ethnography, is to really immerse themselves in the community and to earn their trust, so that they can allow them to tell the stories themselves, rather than having voiceover commentary or talking heads, or create obvious oppositions between the government in a very kind of heavy-handed, one-dimensional way. they allow the subtleties and the complexities of the situation to emerge from the stories and the characters of the people who live there themselves. The Arbor is a really vexing, provocative film, and it's something we talked about for quite some time. It's a film that is a portrait of a playwright and her family and the legacy of the plays that she created in a particularly pivotal moment in Thatcher-era England, but that uses Brechtian alienation effects, such as lip-synced actors, the use of lip-synced actors who mimic the voices of interviews conducted with various members of the playwright Dunbar's family. And it's really also a film about the creative act and the idea that something that one creates, an artist creates, can also be quite destructive or self-destructive. And I think it plays with these various ideas in a as I said, a provocative way, because it really asks whether a documentary, how much fiction is permitted in a documentary, and whether it still remains a documentary. And as I said, that's why we gave it a Vigo Prize, is because it really, Vigo is also very interested in that blurring that division between fiction and nonfiction. The two special mentions. Isiba is a portrait of Armenia, both on a kind of intimate personal level and on a political level. It uses the idea of political metaphor by just juxtaposing disparate images of street life and domestic life in a particular town in Armenia. And again, I think that it's also a film that aspired to tell the story through images and sounds rather than through voiceover commentary. 48 is a stark and, I would say, somewhat confrontational examination of the legacy of political prisoners of the 48-year dictatorship in Portugal. And it allows them to, it's a film that bears witness to the legacy of repression and torture, and to tell stories that otherwise might have been suppressed or denied or ignored, or a painful legacy that often a lot of countries go through and don't want to acknowledge. And the only way to really cope with them is to confront them head on. And I think that by showing still images, still photographs of political prisoners and allowing them to relate their own experiences is a very haunting experience, and it's a very deceptively simple format. It's a very deceptively simple format. But through its use of sound and, as I said, this somewhat indicting imagery draws us into our own sense of complicity in any form of political repression or torture. And then finally, Alan Berliner's short makes of what might have been a poignant and perhaps tragic or depressing illness, Alzheimer's, makes of it a kind of creative act. And in that sense, it's related in some sense to the Arbor. Their styles could not be more different, which is what makes this competition and this festival so compelling. But I think that it, through Alan Berliner's own relationship to his relative who's suffering from Alzheimer's, and from the poet's resistance to his illness and his ability to hear music and poetry in everything he says, even if he's not entirely aware of what he's saying, is a rather extraordinary thing. And I think that it's a beautiful and even sometimes very humorous portrait of, as I said, what could be a very tragic illness.
Right. So that's the interview. Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure.